What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Animal Liberation Hour, where we seek insight from animal rights and liberation activists around the world so that we can think, reflect, learn, and be inspired. Today, we've got an incredible guest, one of my good friends for the past 6 years, Jeremy Loeb. If you've ever listened to his channel, he and I have had discussions before about how we met and kind of how we came up in the movement together. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, but I thought it'd be cool to be able to interview him since he's interviewed me a couple of times. And also, Jeremy's going to be joining us as a host on the Animal Liberation Hour next season, which I'm really excited about. So I thought it'd be cool for everybody to get to know him a little bit. He's got a really cool story, and I can't wait for you to listen to it. Before we get into the episode, I want to remind you that the Animal Liberation Hour is a project of Animal Activism Collective. AAC has a free multinational mentorship program that helps aspiring animal rights activists as well as those who are already activists but want to take their activism to the next level. From one-on-one mentorship to free educational resources to this podcast, AAC seeks to empower humans to fight for animals so that the world will have more activists and we can achieve liberation sooner. For more information, you can visit animalactivismcollective.com and follow AAC on social media. All right, without any further delay, let's get into the episode. Jeremy Loeb. I am pleased and honored to have Jeremy Loeb with me today. How's it going, Jeremy?
It's going good. Nice to be with you, Trey. It's fun to be on the other side of this microphone. Now we've done a couple of interviews together, so
I'm glad to be back on this side. I think I like getting interviewed, but I think I'm more comfortable here. Thanks for interviewing me a couple times, and I thought it'd be really cool to be able to interview you because you do so many podcast episodes on your channel. So I thought it'd be cool to interview the interviewer. And as people may know, you're going to be joining us next season on the Animal Liberation Hour as a host. So I'm really excited about that and honored you're coming on.
Yeah, well, I was really flattered to get that invitation from you because Animal Activism Collective is a group that I've been following since you formed it, and I hold you guys in such high esteem. So it's really cool when you get an invitation from a group that you already have mad respect for. So for me, that was a no-brainer just to say yes and then think about how we can incorporate me into this already cool team that you've got with all the great interviews you've got with Michelle. And I you know this about me, that I've been a big fan of your semi-regular get-togethers with Jerry and Peter Young, and that's been really cool to watch as well.
Yeah, I can't wait to get that started next season. It's going to be exciting. That being said, you have a journalism and public radio background. Can you just get into that a little bit and sort of tell us about that?
Yeah, I spent about 15 years in the public radio sphere, working with 4 different public radio stations over the years, mostly in North Carolina and some in Alabama, or one in Alabama, I should say. I got into public radio during college, and I sort of fell into it. And I always had this kind of sense of justice. I was really kind of passionate person, but I didn't know where to channel that. Public radio was a great outlet for me to do that. And I started to have struggles over the years, realizing that I was more of an activist than I was a journalist. So just to let people know what I was doing, I was a host for most of that time. So I was the on-air person in the morning or the afternoon for your local NPR station, and also a reporter. And that was the majority of the work that I did with public radio. And so during that time, I just really sort of gravitated to issues on the left, I guess you might say, and became really passionate about gay rights and, just anybody that was being oppressed, I was passionate about. But I had this huge blind spot when it came to animals that I'm really deeply frustrated and ashamed of myself with, and ashamed of the public radio circle as well. So it wasn't until after I got out of that world that I watched Earthlings and got into animal rights. And so, but yeah. So to kind of like bring this around, the reason why I'm doing like podcast episodes and stuff is because that sort of circles back to my work in public radio when I was doing a lot of long form interviews at the time, mostly with politicians or musicians or people that I was like really interested in talking to. So I thought that might be a good use of my talents.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we say at Animal Activism Collective all the time, people should definitely find a way to use their skill set, whatever that might be, for the animals. And, there's probably very few animal rights activists who have the kind of background that you have. And the fact that you're using those skills to, highlight different people in the movement and get people to get inspired about animal rights and doing that, through your journalism background, I think that's really cool. I'm wondering, in those years before you were vegan and you were a journalist and you were kind of just starting to get into, some of these issues, like you said, like gay rights and other causes. How did like the journalism aspect of that shape how you see the world? Because I know a lot of times we can turn on the radio or turn on the TV and it can get kind of depressing sometimes. Like, it's good to stay in the know about certain things, but also I know for me personally, I kind of have to like kind of find that balance. So how did you navigate that as a journalist? And yeah, like how did it help you figure out the way that you wanted to go in the world?
That's a good question. And I feel like you pinpointed on something that, and I don't want to paint myself like any kind of victim. I'm obviously like a very privileged person in my life, but it was a struggle to basically my job for a good number of years was like the morning host. And so I would get up at like 4 a.m, go into a studio by myself and spend half of my day before everybody else got to work. So I was very isolated and I was the local host for the national news program. So I'm hearing all this stuff from around the world, all the atrocities going on around the world on a daily basis. And I had to get on the air and perform, basically perform and, be a presence. And it didn't matter, whether or not I was having a bad time or, whether or not I had been through a breakup or, or I didn't feel good or I spent too much time out the night before. I had to go on there and perform. And I feel like um, it gave me perspective. So for one, like any kind of problem that I was dealing with, I remember this specifically. I remember being in Alabama, super depressed. And this was around the time when there was all this news coming out about ISIS and how they were beheading journalists. And for me, it helped to keep things in perspective. Like my day might not be that bad.
But it hits close to home at the same time that
Yeah, it hit close to home because of journalists being killed. I wasn't in danger in that kind of way, obviously, um, but I think perspective was important because like I've been able to use that now in activism and thinking about the animals. Like anytime that something is going wrong with me, it pales in comparison to what's going on with the animals. But it also taught me to, be able to compartmentalize um, my own feelings, my own emotions, and that sort of thing. And you have to just kind of develop a thicker skin, I think. And I have noticed in a lot of people, I'm not saying like I'm some tough guy or anything, but I've noticed like a lot of people don't have that. And so that's another thing that I feel like I've been able to use a little bit more is just like almost a desensitization because I've seen even in people who I really respected in the news media, and this is a slight criticism of them, is that they kind of tune out and shut off. I remember like, one news director that I had who I really respected was kind of like making jokes in the newsroom about murders and stuff. And I was like, I understand why they were doing that because they had to like have that defense mechanism, but it developed some kind of weird callousness. And this is a good person, by the way. Like, and most of the people that I met in public radio were really good people. Um, but yeah, it's been very helpful, I think, in especially as someone who came into the movement. I was 34 when I went vegan, and so I'm almost like in our movement, which is very very young in a way. Um, I feel like almost like one of the old guys, now that I'm in my 40s. And so I feel like I have a bit of a perspective that I can use and kind of help out in a way that just kind of blunt the edges off of things a little bit. I'm not sure if I articulated that
Life
in a
experience. I
way.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, professional and yeah. I mean, as we get older, yeah, we just have more life experience. I'm kind of starting to feel that same way as I approach my 40s.
And you're right. I don't think there's many people with journalistic backgrounds in our movement. There are some, and there are people who do great podcasts and stuff. And I was just watching this great interview with Will Potter, who wrote the book Little Red Barns, and he has a journalistic background. And so, there are some really good people in our movement who have that background and kind of bring that perspective along. But I wish there were more. I wish that the journalism world was more geared towards animal rights, and that's been a real source of frustration for me since learning what happens to animals is trying to explain to my former colleagues we have this big blind spot, and you're still in that position where you can do something about it, and it's been mostly met with deaf ears. Like people are just kind of hiding from it or don't want to talk to me about it or something. It's really frustrating.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Like you trying to use your influence, yeah, with colleagues who are, maybe still have that same kind of platform. Yeah, so that's been a
Mhm.
struggle.
Really a struggle, even with people who I consider like some of my closest friends. And I've brought this story up a number of times, and I'm not naming the person. Of course, I don't want to put them on blast, but one of my dear friends in radio, I had this conversation with, and I told him, like, I had this goal that, we have this saying in NPR land called the driveway moment, where it's like you have this driveway moment because you hear something so compelling on the radio that you're sitting in your car when you get home and you didn't get out of your car, you're in the driveway. Um, and I thought, pigs and gas chambers, that's the driveway moment. And I remember saying, like, I have this goal to get this on the air. We have this huge hog industry in North Carolina. And my friend told me our listeners can't handle that. And I will never forget that. And I also thought that was like kind of selling the listener short. I think it was kind of insulting to the listener and wrong. Also wrong. I think the listeners can handle that and are frustrated that the media doesn't tell them the things that they need to hear. They're like reviewing the latest Hollywood blockbuster on NPR. It's pathetic. Like I have a lot of frustration towards my old radio stations, just for like things that they cover, and waste people's time with. And I had that struggle while I was there before I had this, you know, um, understanding of what happens to animals. Just with wasting people's time on things like that, I wanted us to be talking about things that mattered, and so I had a lot of clashing with authority and during my years, but
Yeah, it's kind of disturbing and alarming to hear that, like any journalist would kind of have that sort of attitude that you described. Because yeah, I mean, if the world needs to know something, the world needs to know it. You know what I mean?
yeah, and it's really it's prioritizing the wrong things. It's like worrying that people are going to turn off the radio because they're so upset. And who cares? If they turn off the radio, they're still going to come back and listen. It's very weird that someone would have that mindset. And it's weird because I was talking to somebody from a newsroom, and NPR is good. By the way, NPR does have a clear separation between the news and the business side. So there's no like, at least in my experience, there was never any like influence from the business side. You could almost understand if somebody from the business side said, that's not good for us. We've got this sponsorship from the Dairy Council or some shit, but it wasn't that. It came from someone in the newsroom. And I found that, like you said, I agree. It's alarming and kind of disturbing. And, coming, especially because it's coming from someone who is news minded and otherwise a great journalist, really.
I'm wondering what drew you to these long form interviews that you do on your channel. I know, like, I mean, I guess like podcasts are kind of hot in some ways, but I feel like I feel like, you know, in a lot of other ways, people are very a lot of people are just really drawn to like this short form content, which I get it, but like for me, you know, I grew up in the '90s, so you know, it's kind of annoying that uh, it seems like these, you know, as we get older, people's attention spans get shorter and shorter, and I even catch my own attention span getting shorter and shorter. So I'm wondering why you think that these long form interviews on your channel are important, and what led you to do those.
It's kind of funny because I guess my answer is like partly out of laziness because when I used to do interviews, I had just have this thing where I don't like to leave anything on the cutting room floor. So even in NPR world, public radio world, like typically local hosts aren't doing long form interviews, but I was, and the main reason is because I wanted everything that we talked about to be put out into the world. And so I would do that. I would interview politicians, and then I would, if I couldn't air the whole thing, I would split it up into pieces and air it over different segments so that people would hear all the stuff that I wanted them to hear, and then post the whole interviews online. And a lot of people weren't doing that. So the reason I say it's like it's not laziness, but it's just more like I don't want to have done work that doesn't go out there. And so I've always kind of had that mindset where I don't like to leave stuff on the cutting room floor. And yes, I agree. Like, it's not really. It is hot, but for our purposes, it's niche. You know, like there's not going to be a ton of people that tune in for a 2 hour interview. I mean, some of my interviews, you know, this have gone over 3 hours at this point, and I realize that's a tough sell for people. Um, and I'm just sort of, it's kind of like you said, like find your place, your voice, that sort of thing. If mine is to provide something that some people like, that's just very niche, then so be it. I just want I just want the information out there, almost like recorded for history in some sense. Like some of the people I've had on my podcast are such incredible people, and I just want their words out there. And then people can do with it what they want. They can take those short form, you know, like little sound bites, which you know you and I do with our interviews already, and put them on social media so we get some powerful message out there, helping the animals, which obviously is the goal. Is hopefully something resonates and sticks. And I guess the goal isn't like virality, but the hope is kind of when you're putting stuff out there that something will, you know, strike, you know, some match will strike. And that hasn't happened for me because it is just very niche, but it could happen. And and the hope is that it's just a net. I've always said I just want to kind of be a net positive on the world, and I think this is helping me to be a net positive for animals to some extent. I hope so anyway, because I have 34 years of eating animals, Trey, to make up for. So
I think it's super valuable. Me personally, like I'm somebody who drives a lot, so I love like putting your podcasts on while I'm driving and getting to listen to these great stories and these great perspectives. Um, you know, while it keeps me entertained while I'm driving down the interstate. So
yeah, yeah, I'm glad
and
to
so
hear that.
yeah, and sometimes I just set aside time to watch it or listen. You know,
And you
even
know this, Trey. Like you know that just about everybody in the movement has a great story to tell. And a lot of people haven't told their stories. I mean, a lot of the people that I've been interviewing lately, their stories are out there and that sort of thing. But um, everybody's got everybody's going against the grain in this movement. So that's already interesting by itself that someone's kind of putting themselves out there, whether it's with family or relationships or whatever, where they're, you know, going against society as a whole and also like taking this. So there's got to be some kind of interesting thread there. And if the story, like, it's kind of like my job, like if I'm interviewing someone and the story's boring, it's because I did a bad job. Like there's definitely not a boring story behind that. It's got to be something at least fairly interesting, I would think.
Yeah, everything I've listened to on your channel has been super interesting. And um, yeah, I mean, I think what you're doing is really, really important, especially because a lot of the guests that you interview, I mean, you have a variety of guests on your channel, but I especially love the interviews with people who have been in the movement for a long time, because while they are well known to, you know, a good many of us and people who were involved in animal rights like back in the day, I think what you're doing is bringing their stories and their perspectives and their history to a new audience, an audience that's listening today to podcasts and to YouTube and all of that. And I actually want to pause that conversation. I want to get into that a little bit more later. We'll save some of it. I want to, before we get too far in the interview, focus a little bit more on you. I know you were talking about, you know, when you were before you were vegan and you were, you know, involved in journalism and stuff like that. But I'd like to know a little bit more about how you went vegan. Like maybe like kind of give us a picture of your life, like right up into the moment you went vegan. I know that there was kind of this event that happened that led you to go
Yeah.
vegan and become an activist. So I'm wondering if you could just sort of paint that picture.
Well, it's sort of informative to me too, because now if I see someone, or like let's say I'm at a cube and someone's talking about like a breakup or something, I'm like, this person is ripe for change. Because what happened to me was I got fired from my last job in radio because I was clashing with my bosses and they fired me. um I guess, like, we had this whole court battle, and I want to be fair to them, but I'll just say, in my opinion, the reason that they fired me was to send a message to the staff. um all that to say, I was going through this change. So I had been fired from my job. This was like before the court battle and everything, and I had lost a relationship. So I had two like big blows at the time where I was just kind of like down and out. And I was at this bar, saw this beautiful woman at the bar, and I approached her with the intentions of hitting on her. And somehow, like, the conversation turned to diet because I guess I had, to NPR slash BBC's credit, I had heard one story, I guess, on the BBC that had talked about how beef was bad for the environment. So I was considered myself an environmentalist at that time, and I was inching that way, but I had no ethics or anything. So anyway, I guess it came up somehow in the course of this like hour long conversation with this woman, and she said to me, Jeremy, those animals that you're eating, they feel pain, they're suffering, all this sort of thing, and then you take that inside you, is what she told me. Now, I don't know if energy transfers in that way, but that was the first time I can say that I was even thinking in that way, that animals are suffering. And long story short, she told me to watch Earthlings. I did so that night, and I went vegan on the spot, and animal rights activist basically on the spot, I think. Um, and it was just that quick. I love my vegan origin story, especially for the fact that I don't know who that woman was. She ended up happening to be married, and so it just turned into a platonic, nice conversation. She lived in Florida. She didn't live where I lived in. So I've never seen her again. Probably never will. Probably wouldn't recognize her if I did. And she probably has no clue what she did that night. And I think that's very powerful reminder that we don't know the impact that we're having with these conversations. And that's what happened. And I mean, watching Earthlings was so horrific, and I was just shocked that I don't even know what I was imagining before. I don't know if I even thought about imagining what happens to animals, but it was a big slap in the face see how brutal it is of what we do to animals. And I don't know why I needed that, but I needed that.
Was there something in particular about the film that really struck you?
Yeah, I think probably I was already hooked and done probably in the first 15 minutes, because in the first 15 minutes is when they're kind of making all these comparisons to the Holocaust and slavery and women's suffrage, all these things that I professed as someone who considered myself extremely progressive to care about. And they were saying there's this other thing that's just like that we're all doing. And I don't know why some people get defensive to that, but I was, like I said, maybe because I was in a period of change, I was very open to receiving that message. And I just don't want to be that person in history that stands by when atrocities are going on. And I always had that sense for years leading up to watching Earthlings. In fact, I remember there's this other um, op-ed that I read from this great North Carolina political commentator, Chris Christensen, I think his name was. I should know that. But he was talking about the Confederate statues and how we're tearing down the Confederate statues. And he made this point. He said, maybe in 100 years we'll be tearing down statues of meat eaters. And he was actually almost like arguing against tearing down the statues. But in my mind, I was like, you're right. We will be tearing down these statues, and we should tear down those statues. So somehow that didn't get through to me enough at that point, but it was like kind of like a little step, I guess.
Did,
Um,
did you
yeah.
start with activism like right after you watched Earthlings, or did it take a little while? What was that process like, and what were those first steps that you took to do activism?
I think after watching Earthlings, I watched Dominion. I watched like all the docs. I started watching Earthling Ed and Joey Carbstrong on YouTube. I was just like kind of I was a sponge. I wanted all the information, and I saw that they were doing cubes and vigils at that time, and that was kind of, this because we got in kind of almost at the same time. Like, and I started doing activism basically with you. It's like a cool history, but back at that time, like kind of the two big groups besides DXE were the Animal Save Movement and Anonymous for the Voiceless. So I just looked up. I think it took maybe a couple of weeks for me to look up something local, and there was a vigil happening at this place called Case Farms, which was an hour away from where I lived. And I just decided to drive there and go and do a vigil with these guys. And I had no idea what to expect. I'm sure I was kind of nervous. And I went, and I think you might have been there at my first ever vigil. You were at least at one of the first few. And but there were definitely some people there who became like friends for life. And I found my crew. I found like family there. And then, of course, I was at a slaughterhouse and seeing it for the first time and smelling it for the first time. And this is a chicken slaughterhouse, and seeing feathers everywhere. And uh, I was already committed. Like, don't get me wrong, but that obviously helped solidify my drive to end these industries.
I wonder what that experience was like for you, having seen those things on a screen on your TV, and then very shortly after experiencing it in real life. Was that kind of surreal?
Yeah, yeah, I would say it was surreal, but I think I already had that kind of like deadened sense a little bit, because I don't remember feeling super emotional or anything. I think because I started with Earthlings and Dominion, which you see like just unbelievable brutality, and then when you're seeing chickens driven into a slaughterhouse, you're seeing incredible suffering. You're seeing them, oftentimes dead on the truck. You're seeing broken limbs. Sorry to be graphic, things like that. Um, but it's not like bloody in the sense that Earthlings and stuff was. But yes, it was surreal. Um, but I think I was already kind of hardened at that point to like be able to emotionally process it. And who knows, maybe years from now we'll all go to therapy or something and find out like we're all deeply damaged people or
Well,
something.
you kind of, yeah, I mean, watching all those documentaries, I think you kind of put yourself through like a trauma gauntlet there. So
Yeah.
it makes sense what you're saying. But yeah, I mean, I just kind of had that thought, like, I've watched a lot of documentaries in my time, and I don't think it's too often where I watch one and then I'm like, okay, I could just like go to where this is happening. You know, it's in my backyard. It's happening everywhere. I can just go check it out for myself, like right now. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I think that's kind of what you did, and that sort of your journalist background. That kind of makes sense. I'm sure that kind of journalistic curiosity drove you a little bit for that as well as the ethics.
Well, I think it was like a call to action. I think I would credit Earthling Ed videos and Joey Carbstrong videos with kind of cementing the idea that I can't just sit by. I already from watching Earthlings and Dominion knew that I had to do something about this, but it was those videos that said, "Here's what you can do. Here's some things that are happening right now that you can go join." um, Maybe the journalism background a little bit. It's funny. I was thinking about this before we came on that our mutual friend who I was just having lunch with, when I met them for the first time, they told me um, that they thought maybe because of my journalist background that I was a journalist who was like infiltrating the animal movement to document the animal movement. And I was just thinking how it's actually the opposite. Like I was an activist who was infiltrating the journalist world as an activist. Um, but I mean, it didn't start that way. I fell into radio, but I obviously very quickly became like more activist minded and pretended to be a journalist for a long time. Um, but no, I just felt like I have to do something. I don't know what it is. You know, when you learn about this stuff, the problem is so huge that you have no idea what can I do about that. That's why Animal Activism Collective is so valuable because it gives people tools like that they can go to find what can I do about this, and whether it's vigils or cubes, pressure campaigns or whatever, people can find their outlet. And in that first year, meeting you and you and I think we're going through the same thing where we were like, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like we were both trying all the activism, everything. We just wanted
Absolutely.
to, yeah, we just wanted to see like, what can we do about this? And then we sort of found where we can be most effective, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad we both figured that out because yeah, I remember when we met, we were both pretty green to everything,
We
and
were.
yeah, yeah, it's great. Yeah, you know, yeah, it kind of feels like you're my brother that I grew up with in animal rights. You know what I mean? Like we
Totally,
grew
totally.
we grew up, and you know, we were sort of like went our separate ways, and then you know we're able to like come back and share our experiences and still like do activism together to
Hmm.
this day, meaningful activism, and
It,
yeah,
it's
that's been kind of a
special to
really cool
me.
experience.
You know, it's special to me. And Trey, I was there for your first speak out, and you know that was in Wilmington. And to be honest, that's like one of the best things that I've heard still to this day. And it's partly because that was your first time with the megaphone and you had a lot to pour out of you. And there's something so beautiful about that. Being green, like you said, like, and just you haven't like perfected how to say everything yet. You don't have like this like streamlined way of talking. You're just speaking passionately. And yeah, to me, that was a really cool moment. Like, I know our world is small. It's like a small animal rights world, but to me, it's historic. That was Trey's first speak out. That's a pretty cool thing to be a part of.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a moment that I look back on fondly. It was definitely we've talked about it a couple times
Yeah.
on your channel. You know, it was yeah. I mean, just going through that whole experience. I think I mean for me, when I first went vegan and became an activist, I was like, where are my people? Do they exist? Are they all in some faraway land? You know, like I see. You know, I went vegan while I was living in you know Alabama. And so, you know, I see people online doing all this activism in Berkeley and San Francisco and London. But, you know, where are my people? And yeah, that 5 day event that we went to, that was like, hey, and I feel like those events attract some of the best kinds of people too. Like anybody who is going to set aside 5 whole days to do animal rights activism, like
Yeah.
it's hard to get away from regular life, whatever that is, to do 5 days of activism. And so I feel like we just met a lot of great people, and that was like a really good foundation for
And
us.
and also you talk about you went vegan in Alabama, and I feel a special kinship for people from the South because when you're sticking your neck out in the South, it feels very different. And this is like obviously I'm not claiming we're better or anything. I'm not making it like that. Like everybody's an amazing activist no matter where they live. But there was a special camaraderie for all of us Southern activists because it's like we just felt like if animal rights is going to happen, is it going to happen in the South? So we had to take on this like culture of like you know how the South is. It's slow to adopt change, and so I just always kind of felt like we have this like really cool crew of people in the South that people don't even know about, and yeah, I hold on to that even if I'm doing workout in California or in the Northeast or wherever it may be. The Southern activists, man, like it can be a lonely world. And I can't even imagine. I spent a year in Alabama. That was lonely for me as just a progressive feeling guy. I can only imagine what it was like being vegan in Alabama. I'm almost glad that it was later. I mean, I'm not glad, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it was kind of a little extra isolating because I had moved to Alabama for a job. So like all my friends and family were back home in South Carolina, and that was just like an extra layer of isolation. But I did find like some people through the local university there, and even though I was aged out of college, I would uh, be invited to like some of their like student meetups and stuff like that. That's like all I could find.
Yeah.
And then I started organizing a little bit like outreach events and things of that nature. And yeah, I mean, I survived, and like I put something out there. And I think what was really huge, honestly, is Yuri, who's been involved with AAC, but is also has worked for Vegan Outreach for many years. He came through on a tour, and a mutual friend had connected us, and yeah, so I think that proves that that kind of like traveling activism and all that. I mean, I don't. It's impactful, and I don't know if anybody went vegan that day when we were handing out leaflets on campus or whatever. But if nothing else, that was my first ever in-person activism, and that was like
Hmm.
super huge for me. But Jeremy, we've talked about the 5 day save a couple of times, and it's mostly been you interviewing me and getting my perspective on it. And we've talked about it a little bit, but I'm wondering like if there's anything else that like really stands out to you about that event, because I haven't really been able to get your perspective on it as much. So is
Well,
there anything that stood out, and anything like you're still kind of like carrying with you today from that event? And for people who haven't watched the other interviews, this was a 5 day event, I think in 2019, 18, somewhere
yeah,
around in there, over
yeah,
the summer in North Carolina, where all these people got together and kind of like crashed in the same house and all this stuff. And there were just kind of various events, vigils, outreach events, etc., that happened. So that's what I'm referring to. But go ahead,
yeah.
Jim.
It was sort of a precursor to the convergences that you guys are organizing. Um, By the way, before I say that, I just want to point out an observation that because you lived in a southern town, kind of a small town where I think there, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there was a lot of animal rights stuff happening. You were traveling around a lot, driving around, to this place, that place. And that's almost become the MO of AAC now because like a lot of people stay in their own hometown. Now AAC is organizing events in, New York City, Portland, wherever. And I feel like that traveling mentality is almost like maybe came from the fact that you were traveling a lot to do that activism. Um, but to talk about the 5 day save, um, I think that was the first time where it was like, oh, we're like almost like a family. Like we're under the same roof. We all get along. We all like work together. I remember meeting Vegan Evan for the first time. He was like the big vegan celeb that I met for the first. He was the first like big vegan. Was Vegan Evan, little 9-year-old, 8-year. I don't even know how old he was at the time, and I was starstruck because it was wild.
And Carrie Berry too.
That's right, Carrie Berry. Yeah, that was amazing. Um, but this took place in North Carolina, in eastern North Carolina, where the hog farms are, and so that was the major thing about that. I think was not only finding, our, doing disruptions. We did, my first disruption was during that, a Walmart disruption, Hardee's, finding our voice was one thing, but also just touring the horrific hog industry in North Carolina on the east. So we saw, CAFOs. I saw CAFOs for the first time, I think, pigs, suffering. We did vigils at the largest slaughterhouse in the world, I believe it was, in Tar Heel. And the dead box was very memorable for me. We found someone in our group just, I guess, knew where to find this and drove us all out to this place, opened up a dumpster full of dead, rotting pigs. Again, sorry to be graphic. And it was brutal, just brutal. And it was a mother pig with her umbilical cord still attached to these piglets. So you could see how animals had been discarded like they were nothing. I think that's the enduring image that I have from that 5 day save, and also just experiencing that firsthand, like you said, watching Dominion and Earthlings. You've seen this on film, but now you're seeing it up close. It makes it a little more real. Um, yeah, that at that point I had seen some things already, but that is still to this day maybe the one of the most upsetting things that I've ever seen in person, because it was just so disrespectful in a way. There's like an added insult to it that they're just like thrown away. And yeah, I know that moment impacted us a lot. I remember we talked about this, how I think you even took the number, or kept the number of one of the pigs that was ear tagged, and held that close to you somehow, in some sort of way. um so yeah. But besides that, meeting all these great activists and forming a community that again was mostly Southern activists that had this kind of camaraderie, was very cool to see, and also uplifting just to see that it's not just me and Trey and whoever's you know doing the vigils with us, but there's also this crew from Florida or Georgia or South Carolina, all these places. It was really cool to see, like, and as we pointed out, these were balls to the wall activists. Like, they set the tone for us, where I'm like, okay, we can't bring this weak shit that I was doing before. Like, we've got to step it up and match their level.
I think you bring up a good point, but because like it's because so many of us come from these like smaller towns in the South, it's sort of like the whole entire southeastern United States sort of like became its own community. Like even though Florida is very far from where I live, it was like closer than New York or something like that. So it seemed like kind of the Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina sort of started to become a thing.
Yeah, it was a regional thing. And again, it's not to throw shade on anybody from other parts of the country, but we knew that this is like a typically ignored area. And so we had to kind of elevate each other to get into the conversation, even so that, national activists are paying attention to what's going on in North Carolina, Florida, South Carolina, and that sort of thing. And they did. and that's a credit to the movement. Is like the movement cares about animals no matter where they are, and that's what's been cool. Just to throw a little shine on AAC. It's just like the amount of support where you guys are just supporting people in Utah, in Chicago. We've just had a couple of big wins in Utah and Chicago that you announced just in the last few days, and this whole mentality of support that we have for each other. Because we all, even though we're talking about the South, like being this kind of like we're in almost like a silo, the whole animal rights movement, all the activists feel that way, no matter where they are, because we're such a small segment of the population already.
Yeah, yeah, and I think what you were saying before about like maybe why AAC does the travel thing. I mean, I think yeah, that's part of the inspiration behind like that support of different cities and all that, kind of like unifying it, and because like I said, when I first went vegan and became an activist, I didn't feel a tremendous amount of support or anything like that. So providing support and providing a community I think is huge, and our story with the 5 day save, I mean, I think that proves that like that community changed my life. I know it changed
Yeah.
yours from what you're talking about too. And a quick shout out to Roxanne and the organizers of that event. Yeah, it was truly transformative. And speaking of the like the travel thing, I know that you traveled and spent some time in Korea. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that happened before the 5 day save. Yeah, because well, it did because I know I had my tattoos. I actually went to Korea to get tattooed, which is kind of interesting. Like I just like kind of on a whim. Again, this was like after all this year of change. Like I deliberately made this a year of transformation for me, which included like I'm gonna get tattoos, and so. But one of my trips was to Seoul, South Korea, and very cool experience because one, I was using Happy Cow, the app, to find vegan food all around the city, which was taking me all over Seoul, Korea, places that I wouldn't have seen down little alleys to find the vegan restaurants. But then the other thing was realizing there's a community of activists that you can plug into almost anywhere in the world, especially if you're talking about a big city. So before I went on the trip, I connected with, I think they were Soul Animal Save at the time, and they had kind of just gotten started. So during the, I think 10 days or so that I was there, one of those days was to join the Soul activists going to a slaughterhouse for a vigil, and that was cool to see because not only it's just a different culture for one, it's cool because they took me under their wing in such a way where not all of them could even speak English, of course, and I was just this outsider. They kind of took me in. um, they also had this like different way of doing things, which was very interesting. Like I've never done this before a vigil, so they gathered in a park. We all gathered in a park and started with exercises. Like I never done that before. We were like stretching, and it's just really interesting.
Is that just like a cultural thing, or?
I think so. Yeah, we like kind of get together first, kind of do some stretching, maybe like I don't know, like a build teamwork or something. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
like bonding or getting your mind in the right
Yeah.
space or something.
Also, and I could be wrong, and I don't mean to speak like out of turn or anything, but I think like in Asia, it might be like a cult, like group exercise might be sort of a cultural thing because you see like especially like older women oftentimes or older men too will like join up in the park and do group exercise activities, that sort of thing. It's kind of like a thing. So I don't know, maybe it's a cultural thing. But then that slaughterhouse, that was the closest that I'd been to animals at that time because you could get right up, and it was cows and pigs. So you could get right up on the trucks. And yeah, we did this like very powerful vigil. Someone was playing guitar and singing, and we had kind of did a circle where we kind of like expressed ourselves. It was very like elaborate. And also this slaughterhouse was selling animal parts on property. Um, and we devised this like kind of way where we could use me as the foreigner who just kind of wants to take a look around. So we snuck in basically to this part of the slaughterhouse where they had all the horrible body parts, and we ended up getting yelled at in Korean, so I couldn't understand it. And but somehow they were able to finagle it where as long as we put our phones away, we could still wander around and take a look and see what was going on. We did snap some surreptitious photos, but yeah, that was an interesting thing. That was the first time that I'd ever like kind of, I guess you might say, like snuck in somewhere too. That was another like formative thing.
And in a foreign country where you can't understand the native language.
Right, but for me, it wasn't stressful because like couldn't understand anything. I'm like, well, I'm just along for the ride. So they are planning everything, and it's their deal. They seem to know what they're doing, and they did. They were like really on top. And by the way, shout out to the Seoul activists. And I don't know if there are that many because when I see Seoul activists, I see my old friends from there, and they are such great activists. And now I see some of them doing some like the most ballsiest activist stuff. They formed DXE, Direct Action Everywhere, Korea at one point. I don't think that exists anymore, but I'm sure they're still doing activism in some form.
You must have had like a massive amount of trust in them to like kind of follow through with that plan off the cuff like that.
Yeah, but I was in that mindset, Trey, where I was like, just whatever, let's just do everything. And I'm just taking life. And like I said, I was in that mindset of like transformation and pushing myself and pushing boundaries and like, my boundaries is what I mean, pushing my boundaries to see what I was capable of, that sort of thing. So I was along for the ride, and I was already beaming because I was having this cool time in Korea. It was going so well. That trip was awesome. The tattoo artist was so interesting. And yeah, the whole trip was going well. Although I do remember I was very stressed that morning that we went to the slaughterhouse because there was a part of my tattoo that I thought had been messed up that I needed to get fixed up. And I remember like being kind of distraught about it. It's a long story of why that was distressing to me. We don't need to get into it. But that was another moment where I was able to compartmentalize and get some perspective, knowing the pigs are going to the slaughterhouse. My problems are so minuscule compared to that. And I need to go and be there for them, even though all we were doing was bearing witness. And obviously there's some limitations to that, but I was able to tell their stories.
Well, speaking of perspective, I wonder, if this experience you had in Korea, like when you were, I'm guessing you were like a fresh vegan during that time. You were
Yeah.
pretty new. How do you think that maybe your perspective on activism and animal rights is maybe different because of that experience?
I don't know if maybe it's more worldly or something like maybe like I just saw that, there's like different ways that people are doing things. I don't know. Like maybe it's also just a respect because I saw that, in my opinion, I don't mean to like do a hierarchy, but they were better activists than me at the time. They were more courageous. They were more on the ball. They were, they just had it down. It was really impressive to see. Um, so yeah, I don't know if it just made me like kind of open in a way to, I don't know, maybe being humble and realizing that, uh, and I've tried to always take this and carry this, even gaining some experience in activism, that I don't have the answers, because if I did have all the answers, then we'd have animal liberation. So I guess it gave me just, I'm kind of reaching because of your question. I'm trying to find an answer to it, but it may be that I have it helped solidify this mindset that um, everybody's trying their best, and the best answer may not be what I'm doing. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think if I were in your shoes, I think it'd be interesting to me to be brand new to animal rights and see that people care so intensely, all the way across the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, all the way on the other side of the world, there's people who care about animals and are taking this kind of action. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, it solidified the notion that this is a global movement, and it is, and that it's a global justice movement. That maybe what it solidified in me is confidence that we're going to win, and I do have confidence that we're going to win. I don't I don't necessarily know if that's going to happen in our lifetime, that we're going to achieve, you know, the as close to animal liberation as we could possibly achieve, but uh regardless of what happens in America, the activists in Korea aren't going to stop. If they stop the activists in Korea, the activists in the UK aren't going to stop. I just know that this movement has some of the best people in it, and that they're not going to be deterred. And I can kind of bring this around to Zoe. Like they can lock up Zoe Rosenberg for 5 years if they want to. They're going to do is light a fire under Almira and Cassie and Wayne and all these other activists. You know, yeah, they can't stop us. That's the message. This movement will win. And it's just a matter of when. I like how you said this about some of your pressure campaigns. It's not a question of if we're going to win, it's a question of when we're going to win. And that's what's up to us, is whether or not we want this to happen quickly. If we're too content and resting and confident that someone else is going to do the work, we can't be like that. We have to, like, be the ones who say, like, this is unacceptable right now. We're going to do it. Yeah.
Speaking of direct action everywhere, DXC and Wayne, I know that DXC is like a significant part of your story. Can you tell us about your relationship with them and how that all started and your work with Wayne?
Yeah. So that all started for me in North Carolina, ironically, because they're not in North Carolina, but they were at that time, because Wayne was on trial for rescuing a few goats from this place that wasn't too far from where I was living. And so he was on trial for rescuing those goats. A buddy of mine, a mutual friend of ours, said, we ought to go to this thing. And I was like, you're right, we ought to go to this thing. And I started to go to it every single day, went to the trial every day, because I was just able to at that time. I was like a street musician at the time. I had a complete open schedule that I could do. And and basically started to get to know the members of DXC who are all there for Wayne, and got to know Wayne a little bit too. And because I was this North Carolina guy and everybody else was from California pretty much, including Wayne, I tried to make myself useful by giving little suggestions here and there. One I remember, like, during jury selection, there was one of these potential jurors who mentioned that they work for Boar's Head, and I was thinking that Wayne's not going to know what Boar's Head is. And it's like this meat cheesemaker thing that you see in like Ingles restaurants, and right. Um, so when I started to make like little suggestions, when we would like kind of gather around, I think that that's when a relationship started to form between Wayne and I, which I didn't realize was happening because it was later. And Wayne was convicted during that trial, by the way. And I was deeply moved by how professional and he was during that trial, and DXC. It was a little while after that I got a butt dial from Wayne. So Wayne didn't mean to call me, but obviously the reason he accidentally called me was because he was looking me up. But he butt dialed me, and then when I talked to him, he was like, "Yeah, we were wondering if you were interested in getting involved." At that time, DXC Press was run by Matt Johnson, the great activist, and he flew me out to California with the. At that time, it was the idea was maybe to turn over DXC Press to me. And so for about a week, he showed me the ropes of how DXC was worked, and I was blown away by how hardworking everybody was, including Matt Johnson, who's no longer with DXC. He was so good. Now at that time, I didn't join the team. I decided, like, I had too many like personal ties in North Carolina that I was wanted to see. I had like potential relationships, that sort of. I couldn't go to California at the time, or didn't want to. And But I did form a relationship, started to attend meetings later down the road, and started to volunteer with the DXC press team, who was at that point run by Cassie King, who is still running the DXC press team, and just wanted to make myself useful. And I kind of like, honestly, I had felt kind of bad that I didn't take the job because I felt like I kind of wasted their time a little bit. I came out there to California on their dime and kind of looked around and then didn't take them up on the job. But it was the right move, I think. But I wanted to make myself useful to that team because I was blown away by how hardworking they were, how they never stopped working for the animals. So yeah, I still volunteer with the DXC press team, and yeah, my relationship with Wayne deepened later during the Sonoma trial, when he went to prison. Um, and shut me up if you want, because I could just ramble forever. But
Well, I was going to ask you. I want to get to the paralegal stuff because I know your background's in journalism and not legal. But Wayne, I think, asked you to be a paralegal, so
yeah,
I'd love to get into that.
well, that, like I was saying to you before, like that's probably the most interesting thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life. Was just that. So Cassie invited me out to California for Wayne's trial to help out with the press team. So I was there, um, kind of just like as a bit of an addition, to the press team. And one of the ways that I was trying to be helpful was helping out with reviewing body cam footage, police body cam footage, that they had all these hours of body cam footage that the legal team needed help with, to look for things that the police may have said that didn't reflect well on their attack of the activist, essentially. I guess I shouldn't say attack, but whatever. So anyway, I guess it was because of that. That's the only thing that I can point to, other than also, having a journalism background that Wayne took to. But Wayne at the time had a paralegal that was Alicia Santorio, who's also an amazing activist, who, by the way, helped me out a ton during that trial. Um, she had a personal tragedy going on at the time, and so she had to step away. So Wayne needed a last minute addition to the team to be his paralegal, and he asked me, and I don't know why. Again, like it's amazing to me, but I said yes, of course, because this was, for me personally, it was amazing. I got to sit up there the in the trial with Wayne side by side, watching this entire trial. And by the way, the trials are interesting to me, especially when they have to do with animal rights. So I was pretty fascinated by what was going on in North Carolina during the goat trial. Um, so yeah, anyway, I didn't even have a suit or anything. I had to go to a thrift store, get a suit, because I was just there to like be an addition to the press team. And all of a sudden I'm there as like, Wayne's main right hand man. Basically, I was in charge of handling the evidence, all the exhibits, that sort of thing. Basically, like, helping out the team as best I could. And that's when I essentially moved into the legal Airbnb and got to know all of them. And and by the way, I see you guys have on your schedule right now, I don't know when this is going to come out, you have on your schedule Wayne and Stefan Seitz. And Stefan, was someone who came in like a day or two after I joined the team. And I remember Wayne kept talking about this guy Stefan, and I was like, oh, this guy Stefan's going to come. I expected like some, like, slick lawyer type, because he was described as this amazing lawyer. And he came in, and you'll see this, and you may know this already. Stefan's like the most down to earth. He's just, I love Stefan, and he is a brilliant lawyer, and he's the reason why. Not to jump around, but he was the one who wrote the petition for a special prosecutor of Ridgeland Farms and got that approved. So he's a very, very competent guy. And I'll just say, like, so anyway, I joined the team. I was like in charge of the evidence and all that. And I'll just say a little shout out to Stefan, who would stay up with me late at night, helping me print things out, do all this kind of stuff that he didn't have to do. It was pretty amazing. So that, again, it was kind of like a 5-day save moment where I was like experiencing camaraderie on another level, and also getting to know Wayne a lot better, who you can only listen to Wayne for like 2 minutes before you realize this guy is absolutely brilliant. And he he is a really cool person to know, and he's a big part of my story. And um, he's one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing today. Yeah. So that was
I'm sure
cool.
most people know who we're talking about, but just for anybody who doesn't, we're talking about Wayne Hsiung, the co-founder of
Oh yeah.
Direct Action Everywhere, as well as the Simple Heart, which, I know you went on to be the chief of staff at the Simple Heart. But before we jump to that, I just got to say, like, the whole paralegal thing, first of all, to me, is super inspiring that you were able to jump into such a high stress situation and take that on. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't think there's a whole lot of people who have like the gumption to be able to do something like that. That would scare the hell out of me.
Some of it was scary, but I had like this. I have some hubris in me, and that's part of where like doing a podcast. It's helpful to have a bit of that because, like, a lot of times when I'm inviting someone on my podcast, I'm like, I don't even belong in the same stratosphere as this person. These people are like so incredible, but you have to have some of that like belief in yourself to like, no, I belong in this conversation. But yeah, I was totally like not prepared for that. But the reason why I'm actually, even though Wayne was convicted, we lost. I mean, he went to prison for 38 days, but I am proud of the work that we did. But one of the reasons why I thought I was able to do it was because it was so focused. And I realized, we can talk about, Simple Heart to some extent. I don't feel like I was as effective on the Simple Heart because there was so many roles that I was trying to take on. But in the trial, it was so focused. We just attending the meetings, you know, getting scripts for witnesses, that sort of thing, making sure you get all the evidence. But yeah, it was like a trial by fire thing for me. The comfort that I had was that I wasn't the main person in the hot seat. That was Wayne, but I was trying to be as supportive as I could. And yeah, it was me and Wayne. And by the way, the team was whittled down because the judge disliked Wayne so much that she kept kicking members off the legal team. And so at one point, it became just me and Wayne in the trial, and we would
That's
just be there.
crazy.
It's wild, and we'd be there with the judge and the prosecutor alone. And I want people to understand this because I learned this about trials. How much is decided without the jury present? Like in the case of like, I wasn't there for the Zoe Rosenberg trial, and she's well explained this, that she wasn't able to present evidence of animal cruelty. But I witnessed it firsthand because I was a person during Wayne's trial who was preparing that evidence. And we'd be there with everything prepared minutes before the jury was to be sat down, when they would somehow be able to rule on our evidence and decide, no, you can't show that. You can't show that. And then the judge would require me to change all this stuff, which was all prepared, and I'd be scrambling. So the jury would start walking in. Minutes before the jury would walk in, seconds. They'd walk in. I'm scrambling to fix our thumb drives, to fix our scripts. This is what animal rights activists are up against. This biased system. It's ridiculous. And so there would be some moments where we would look incompetent because they caused us to have to scramble. It was absurd. And so it'd be like, no, you can play this one, but you got to take the sound out. You can't play this one. You can't. And it was all like layered. And by the way, when you're doing evidence, sorry to go on a tangent, but when you're doing evidence, it all has to be named and turned in according to a specific number. And so it would be like A, B, C. And so when you took out B, now we've got A and C. This doesn't make any sense anymore. At the end of the trial, they were like, you've got to clean this up. And they sneered at us as I was scrambling to understand what had been taken out. I mean, it was insane, man. That whole experience was very informative for me. And the main point of this is that if you ever serve on a jury, you are seeing 1% of the evidence. One. Like none of it. You don't get to see anything. Everything's been decided. So if you go on a jury and the defendant gives a piss poor defense of themselves, just understand that they were prevented, maybe in some cases, from defending themselves because we literally couldn't say or show certain things. And and I'll shut up in a sec. What was so devious to me about that was them allowing certain photos that didn't look that bad. So we wanted to show the jury everything. So we would show them, you know, scenes of animal cruelty, and they would let us show like, oh, this bird had a red eye. This one had like a hurt wing, but they weren't getting to see the birds rotting to death on the ground, that sort of stuff. So they got to see some, and they're like, that's what these activists are complaining about, is like a few injured birds, which by the way is terrible already. We know that, but that's just that's just a little context that I think that I was very privileged. Thank you, Wayne, for that opportunity. Wayne Wayne is an amazing person, but I was so privileged to get that perspective, and I'm happy to share that with people now because it's it's really dark. It's really bad.
Thank you for sharing all that and like kind of diving deep into it because we talk a lot, but this isn't really ever something we've talked about. That I remember like this is really interesting to me, and I'm thinking too. Wayne is such a well known person in the animal rights movement that a lot of people adore, and sort of to like maybe there's this pressure of like kind of having his fate in your hands, and then obviously there's the aspect of the animals that that's the whole reason for this whole thing, and you're kind of doing this thing that you're not qualified at all to do, but you
Exactly.
but you've stepped up, and then yeah, and then that aspect of like a layman, for lack of a better term, like seeing the belly of the beast and what's going on behind the scenes, peeling back the curtain and seeing this corruption that really is just the system. It's I doubt that what you experienced is one off. It's probably more like this is how our system is in the United States, and probably similar or maybe even worse in other places. So uh yeah, I mean, like what was like, did you feel the magnitude of all of that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I felt all those things you said. Like Wayne is this adored figure for good reason, and I felt um, protective. Like I was like, this is my brother, you know. And I felt that way in North Carolina too. I was because I saw him speaking in such a beautiful way on trial, and I was like, you know what? He's giving voice to the things that I would want to say too, and he's doing it so well. So I had a huge amount of gratitude to him. So yeah, I felt like I just my role was to make things as easy as I could for Wayne so that he had a fighting chance. And I really thought we were going to win, honestly, because I thought our defense was so good, and we had these amazing witnesses at the trial. We had like people like Alexandria Paul, and I mean, we just had like the most. And Zoe was a witness. We had amazing people, but I saw like the bias runs deep. These jurors didn't care, I guess. And by the way, at least one of the jurors reached out to Wayne after convicting him and attended his sentencing and was, I guess, remorseful. And it just goes to show that they weren't shown the evidence, but it's also like, wow, like how do you miss your mark that much? Anyway, I shouldn't throw shade on jurors, but I just I see that as such a privileged position to be in, where you can decide history, and how do you not take that opportunity to speak
Uh,
to?
a lot of people don't think of it that way. I've had jury duty, and I got selected to be on a jury once, and the case ended up like getting thrown out on a technicality before we could ever decide anything. But Yeah, I mean, really, the vibe of almost everybody there is like, I'm missing work, I'm missing time with my family. Like I don't think anybody there other than me was, maybe one other person or something, but I didn't feel that vibe of, hey, this is our duty to like get this right and all that. Like I don't know if most people feel that way. People should, but I don't know if most people do.
Yeah, I could see that on like a trial that didn't have this kind of intrigue to it. Like, but the jurors have to know that when you're in like, I guess in the case of Zoe, and I guess it was pretty much the same for Wayne. It was like 2 months, 7 week trial for Zoe. I think it was like almost like 8 or 9 weeks with Wayne, and they have to know this is big time. Like we're being sequestered. Like all these kinds of things where uh, this isn't like a traffic violation. So yeah, I get what you're saying though. Like they don't come into it with that mindset though. They're more like, yeah, we're getting inconvenienced. Why the hell are we here? Um, but yeah, but to the point of Wayne, and I have felt that every time. Like I mean, part of it was just like driving Wayne to the courtroom, and I just knew like I have to be locked in like that, and that's why it worked because you just lock in. I'm driving around with precious cargo. This is like a very important person in the movement, so I'm like turn signal, make sure I'm going the speed, like yeah, I felt the weight of it for sure, and but the reason why it worked out, I mentioned Alicia, helping me out a lot, Stefan helping me out. Um, I don't. I mean, the team was incredible and the support was incredible. And so we had this, it was sort of like we talked about with North Carolina. We had this sort of bunker mentality, silo mentality where it's us against the world. And I knew that the guy next to me had my back and I knew I had their back. So um, I felt the pressure, but I felt supported also at the same time. And there's also a bit of comfort in the fact that nobody could expect me to know what the hell I'm doing. So I think I did a decent job, but any mistakes I made, it's like, come on. I don't
Well,
know. Yeah.
I think there's also something to be said about Wayne, and I'm wondering if you think this situation was like unique to you, or if you just kind of find this to be true in general about Wayne of seeing things in people and just giving them this tremendous responsibility because he does believe in those people, and I'm sure like for you that must have been you know as stressful as it was, it might have been comforting in some way that here you are like a newer activist, and this somebody of this stature is believing in you enough or sees something in you enough to give you such a huge load of responsibility.
Yeah. It felt so good. Yeah. It was so flattering. And it's the honor of a lifetime. I've said this to Wayne, like that was the honor of a lifetime. Yeah, someone with his stature to see something in you and believe in you and yes, give you some responsibility and expect that you can do it. And Wayne can be a hard ass, by the way. He can be hard to work with in some ways where like he expects this to work and it's good, by the way. I'm saying that as a positive. Like he expects this to be good. But he's not like, when I say that, it's not like he gives you the tools, like he helps you, he understands what you don't know, that sort of thing. Uh yeah, he makes it so that it's possible for you, at least especially during that trial, he made it very possible for me to help him to succeed. And it was just up to me to fulfill that. And I didn't have a choice. When someone is on trial and their freedom is on the line, um, you don't need much more motivation than that to know I got to lock in. And so, and I also, because it's temporary, a trial is temporary, you're going to be here for a few weeks. It ended up being like 2 months. Like it's not that hard. So for any for the people who this situation arises, you know, it's not that hard to lock in for that amount of time, knowing like my buddy is about to be maybe thrown in prison, and he did. And by the way, that's tragic. That was tragic to me. And another part of that story is that I mentioned that people were kicked off the legal team. Well, during jury deliberation, I was kicked off the legal team as well and was not able to be there during Wayne's trial. It had nothing to do with me. I won't get into why. She wanted to punish Wayne for something that someone else did, and kicked me off the team, so I wasn't able to be there during his verdict reading, and I really felt bad for that because I I at least wanted him to have someone next to him, you know. Um, Not that I could have done much, but
Yeah,
you know,
but that means yeah, but no, I understand. I understand that totally. Like you don't want someone, even somebody as strong-willed as Wayne and who's a leader. Like we're all humans, and I don't think any of us want to be alone in a moment like that.
yeah, and I mean, and people should understand about Wayne that he is extremely strong, but he is human. I mean, he breaks down. He's shed tears numerous times in front of me, usually about his dog or, you know, his family being away from his dog, things like that. But he's an emotional guy. So yeah, I mean, I almost feel like everybody who's strong, like some aspect of their strength is a front too. Like I'm sure he felt fear up there. I'm sure he did. Um, he's calculated that he's. I even saw when he was convicted in North Carolina that he basically asked for prison time. He didn't want probation. He said, "I need to see the inside of a cage," because he calculates that as part of this journey to animal liberation, I think. And he's probably right that some people will have to see the inside of a cage. And they have already, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think some part of strength is, you know, to some degree being able to reveal your emotions in certain moments and that kind of thing. So I guess it like depends on what you mean when you say strength or something, you know.
Yeah.
But I think this is a good opportunity to segue into the fact that you've kind of been in all these really different activism like scenarios and activism spaces. We've kind of talked about what you've learned from this specific situation, but between this situation and like the 5 day save and your experience in Korea and your experience with journalism and like talking to all these people from the movement and everything, like what are some of like the key things that you've learned just from the whole like bird's eye view experience?
Um, I feel like I don't have the any more insight into this than you do. And I say that because I feel like one of the things that was of all these experiences, still I point to that book by Peter Young that you point to, Liberate. And it's the reason I point to that is more just about overcoming fear. And you know that about that book. It's like the cop lives in our head. And that's killing it. I think he said it that that's what's causing more animals to die than anything. Now I don't know, you know, is that, but anyway, fear is what holds us back. Um, the bird's eye view is that well, for me, I've been very privileged in this movement to experience all these cool different experiences and interesting things. But it kind of goes back to how I started, which was a year of reinvention and pushing my own boundaries. And that is the kind of mindset that I've tried to have throughout, of just pushing myself a little bit more. And that's what I want to encourage. That's what I'm doing with my YouTube channel in a way, is just to encourage. It's kind of the same mission that we have, that you have with AAC, which is helping people to find their voice. Um, it doesn't mean you have to be Wayne Hsiung or Peter Young and doing all that kind of stuff. But um, finding like the thing of that you can contribute. Actually, here's a good. I've been reading Lab Dog by Melanie Kaplan. She just wrote this book about dogs being used in testing, and she wrote about this guy Henry Spira. I think I'm getting that right. Who kind of was one of the early guys who started talking about animal testing, and has been extremely influential, was during his life. And one of his quotes was something like, I'm not looking at animal activists as saints or animal abusers as devils, that sort of thing. I'm just seeing the full picture of animal abuse and seeing what I can do, like where I can, make change, which is, it's a simple concept. It's not that profound, but it's stuck with me because he's like, the big picture is what it is, but I'm just looking about what I can do in it. And he ended up having great success. One more thing I want to say. I also was watching this interview that Will Potter did on the Green Scare Pod, which was really cool, and I like that. Will was talking about how we have to maintain this movement over the long term, um, which means understanding that this can take time and not flaming out, not burning out. That doesn't mean take a break all the time. I'm not saying that, but it means like thinking about where you can do this sustainably. And yeah, for all of us, you, me, and all the activists, like part of a good thing to know about yourself is your limit. Like, what is your limit? And push the limit, but don't like go so far that you break, essentially, because we have a lot of that. Sorry, that was a long tangent there that I went on.
No, no. I mean, I don't really think it was a tangent. I think it was all great and made sense and was beneficial. Um, I was kind of alluding to this earlier in our conversation, but um, I think a large part of what's so valuable about your YouTube channel to me is that you're preserving this animal rights history. And, like you and I have read books like Liberate and, Will Potter's books and, that kind of thing. But a lot of people just don't read anymore.
Yeah.
A lot of even animal rights activists. I mean, they don't read a lot of books. I think part of that is like culture, like so many people are just on social media and doom scrolling, or if they are like intentionally consuming content, it's something other than a book a lot of times. So I think I think we should encourage people to continue to read, but I also think we kind of have to like meet people where they're at and do these important, interviews, which are just as important. I think these like conversations that people can listen to are just as important in a different way than the books are, and that's what you're doing. And I think that by preserving this animal rights history, you're kind of like opening that world to your audience that maybe wouldn't have known about it before. And I think it's really important to preserve animal rights history because to me, it's kind of crazy. I look back at my own animal rights journey and I didn't really look to history at all at first. I just looked to what people were doing, like what was popular activism in that moment. And I don't think that's how necessarily we should approach things at all. Not saying that people need to, dive into history before they can get involved in activism, but I do think it's important to have some kind of understanding of, where we've been, where we are, and where we can go. And I think that's what you're doing on your channel. So, how do you think that this history and this storytelling that you provide on your channel, like how do you think that has influenced activism and like public perception of animal rights and certain forms of activism?
Yeah, well, just want to say like thank you for that because that is exactly kind of the goal of a lot of this stuff. I mean, I started the channel. I was like, what should I say about this? And the first thing that I said was I will expose the good in other activists because I saw so much infighting, that sort of thing. So the idea was first to just kind of shine a light on people and celebrate their work. But I, over the course of that time and over the last like 3 or 4 years, I had the same experience where I realized, wow, there's this incredible history that I don't even know about. So it's almost like with the podcast, it's almost happening in real time where I'm learning about these guys for the first time. I'm learning about this history, and I find it fascinating. I hope that other people do. I think it's I think it's a real blind spot we have in this movement that I had that I'm trying to correct because there is just this wealth of knowledge and wisdom that we can draw from. It doesn't mean they have all the answers because, again, none of us do. Like, we'd have animal liberation now if someone had figured this all out, but they have good answers and they've done amazing things. I mean, the people that I've had on my podcast are people that have done amazing things. And one thing that I kind of realized this when Jane Goodall died. I'm like, I know that Jane Goodall's done 1,000 interviews, of course, but they're like we're losing, like we will lose people. And one of the things that I want to kind of make sure that I'm doing with my podcast is, like you said, preserving some of this history and getting these words out because the long form podcast form, it's popular on like Joe Rogan and like on celebrity status, but for people like Animal Rights Podcast, like I mentioned, there's Green Scare Pod, there's Our Hen House, there's some really great podcasts out there. AAC is doing great podcasts, but we're a niche, like there's not a ton of people doing this. So having someone just be able to speak for hours if they want to is like kind of uh I think it's invaluable. And you and I know because we have some mutual friends who are like old hands in the movement. And they're teaching us all the time. Like we're learning so much from these guys. And it's changing, I think, the way we operate, the way we do our activism, at least giving us perspective. Um, and I think the whole thing about reading too, I think it is a shame a little bit that people don't read more, but yeah, it's just reality. Like I do encourage one of the pieces of advice I got from my radio mentor, this guy George, who taught me radio, was just always be reading something. And I wish people would do that. Now I say that at the same time, one of the messages in the book that Peter Young wrote that we're alluding to, Liberate, is the message is put down the book. So there's that too. There essentially, I think people should be informing themselves, learning the history, but don't let that be a substitute for action. And that's
Right,
why
it's
I
a
like
balance.
right. I like that message that I've seen people talk about this. Like, you already know, like, you don't have to be a scholar of the movement to know. It helps, it informs, but it shouldn't be a substitute for getting out there and doing. And sometimes it is, including with me. Sometimes I'm reading a book, I feel like I'm doing activism. I'm not. I'm learning about it. Um, but yes, I mean, there's a wealth of knowledge out there. I feel like we're just sitting on this gold mine, and I felt that a lot of times about music, like, or some other things where it's like people just haven't discovered this kind of thing. It's all out there. You've got like elders of the movement with wealth of wisdom to share. And again, they're not always right, but you listen to people, and this as like someone who has been such a great advisor to people in the movement. You take the things that you agree with, you leave the things you don't agree with, and you take those things into consideration. And not to make this all about Wayne, but that's one of the things that I respect about Wayne is he likes those opposing views too, which was often my role on the team. Was just like I was we disagree on a ton of things, and he loves that. And I think we fight in our movement. Here's a good message for our movement. We fight over disagreements instead of like using those disagreements as informing us. Those disagreements are good for us. John Curtin, who was a guest on my program, such a legend. Like everybody should interview John Curtin. He's got stories. And he said, he was talking about Barry Horn, the guy who went on hunger strike and died. Such a legend. He was saying, I used to call him Barry the Bastard. We used to fight all the time, and I loved it. This is important stuff. Let's fight about it. I love that. Like, yeah, we're too sensitive in our movement to disagreements. So that's a good message for, and AAC's done really well at this, promoting camaraderie across the movement. DXC, these are groups, by the way. Like some of these groups have differing strategies and at times have been at odds with each other. And there's been this merge that AAC has facilitated. That's where I have such gratitude to you, because you've really helped do that, where there's been some of these, divisions in our movement that you've helped to bridge. And I hope people will understand that disagreeing with your fellow activist is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it's even a good thing. You need those. We can't be in a silo all the time. We can't be in a groupthink.
Yeah, I think, man, that's such an important message, and I appreciate the kind words, but I think you've done a lot of work in that space as well. First of all, just having people on your channel of differing views, I think is just refreshing. You know what I mean? To not have that, like you said, groupthink where you know you can actually just like talk to people of different opinions and have a civil discussion. That's something that I feel like is being lost more and more every day. I can't speak for the whole world, but it feels like in this country, the United States, it feels like that all the time. And also, like your work on the DC summit earlier this year, um, I thought was a great example of trying to bring people together. And that was a really great event. That was a fantastic event, and a lot of amazing things have come from that event. I'm wondering if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's good. And I should say, um, the reason why the DC summit happened in the reason why it became this convergence of differing groups is because there were people from CAFT already in the conversation. So I want to give them credit. When I saw that there were people from CAFT, the Coalition to Abolish the Fur Trade, joining some of our meetings discussing this convergence, and these are people with animal activism collective as well. And by the way, so when I've looked over the years at like who are the groups that are getting things done, obviously I have my relationship with Direct Action Everywhere, and then I saw AAC, you guys are doing amazing things, getting wins, and CAFT is getting wins. And so I realized like we're all doing sort of different things a little bit, but these are the activists that are getting things done. So when I saw that there were people from CAFT, I said to Wayne in the group, I was like, this is our opportunity to forge this partnership with these groups. Doesn't mean we have to all work together all the time, but there has been this division where it's been really destructive. You know this. Like there's been some real division between groups, and I was like, this is a great opportunity to get some of the all the same people who get shit done in one room together to talk and have form a bond with each other, camaraderie. And it worked. It did. And it worked despite some real pushback. And it's fine. And by the way, like people who push back on this convergence, uh, I'm sure they had their good reasons, and it's okay. But this was a beautiful coming together, and huge credit to Wayne. He was he was a very good facilitator of this. Huge credit to CAFT. Huge credit to AAC. We all came together and had this like real. Well, first of all, we came together. Um, we learned about open rescue. we protested Omni, we protested Laura Piana. We got like the Omni win just happened like maybe a month ago, thanks to you guys and all these activists. But I mean, and now Wayne, who honestly is one of our most effective activists, got to see up hand, close and personal, how AAC operates, how CAFT operates, and saw them get that win.
And he was very much a part of it too. Like he was
Right.
leading chants at Omni. He
Yeah.
pulled this little stunt at Laura Piana where he like went inside pretending to be a customer and all this stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah.
he wasn't just it wasn't just like I don't know. It didn't. Everything seemed genuine. You know what I mean? It seemed
Yeah.
like a genuine collaboration.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, I mean, I don't want to speak to the drama because I don't want to add fuel to them, but there had been divisions between some of the people in that room in the past, and those were set aside during that time. And that's just a credit to everybody in that room. I tried to help facilitate that, and I think that was maybe a good thing that I did because these activists are some of the best that are out there. And I think that's, it kind of gets to the podcast again. It's like just recognizing who's great, recognizing some, and that's not to say everybody ain't great, but like just kind of like look at who's doing this stuff, who's getting the wins, I think that's kind of one of the things that a role of a podcast is, and you guys do that with AAC. It's just to kind of highlight, and that's why I say I love the talks with Jerry and Peter, because it's almost like you guys are giving a voice to those activists. And we're talking about when you guys come together, you talk about ALF raids that happen where they're anonymous activists who have no voice other than a communique. And then you have someone like Peter Young, who had been in the ALF in the past, is now, had gone to prison, so he can speak about it. And Jerry Vlasic, who's been part of the movement for a long time, can speak about it and kind of explain what's going on. And celebrate these wins because animals are literally getting freed. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about just trying to be around great people or whatever. I mean, I think that just like applies to any part of life. I mean, there's that old cliche like surround yourself with the people that you want to be like. I mean, if you if you hang out with somebody who smokes cigarettes, you're more likely statistically to smoke cigarettes. Like it's something as simple as that. So I mean, if you're um, surrounding yourself with people who are taking bold action and doing the kind of activism that you want to do, and being the kind of person that like you want to be to, at least to some degree. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, the people that I surround myself with inspire me every day. I don't know if I could keep going without them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And kind of streamlining our work a little bit because we are kind of scattered and in our different groups and that sort of thing. And that's just going to be the case. I've had to come to accept that not everybody has the same strategy and they're going to do their thing. But as much as we can, streamlining, getting everybody on the same page on something, whether it's foie gras or fur or an open rescue, kind of streamlining kind of our small resources into that. But when we had all those activists in the room, I almost had the sense like while we want to grow our numbers, of course, of activists out there, it's almost like I feel like we've got the pieces. Like we have so many of the great people in that room. And so we need more people. But a lot of the people who are listening to this podcast right now, you are already those people who have the tools. And, you're like, I imagine this is mainly activists that are listening to this or people curious about activism, like you already are very powerful. And yeah, I mean, that's a good plug for these convergences happening. You guys should all come to these things because they're life changing. They really life changing. It goes back to that 5-day save that Trey and I was a part of, and it forged, friendships for life and just an immense amount of dedication and but yeah, I mean, but it should also just be empowering to know that you can make these changes. I mean, you guys are talking to people all the time, people who've made changes in their communities, sometimes with an email or a phone call or what. Like, you're empowering people to do these things, and everybody should take that. Everybody should take that message that you're powerful. Um, yeah, yeah,
Mostly, I think an activist audience, but I'm sure there's probably a couple of cops and industry people listening
yeah,
to
yeah.
this. So we want to give them a shout out.
I always wonder how many of my listeners, yeah, are just the FBI listening.
um, well, speaking of talking to our audience, I'm wondering what advice you might have for somebody who's kind of still finding their place in the animal rights movement. We kind of spoke a lot about our coming of age, so to speak, within our animal rights experience. So for those who are listening who maybe haven't taken action yet or are just getting started, what advice might you have for them?
So, kind of twofold. It's like, one, you have this resource with Trey and AAC. You have people that can help you. So, one is like, listen to them. Also, learn about the history too, like, so that you can kind of find your way. But the last piece of advice kind of runs counter to that, which is do it your way. Like, um, don't be a follower, be a leader. Like, do your thing. Um, I've always been that way. And now having worked with groups, like, they can tell you like my strengths and weaknesses, but one of the things that is a strength and a weakness is that I just do things my way, and I think it serves me more than it hurts me. It may um I just say I would encourage people, think unconventionally and stick to your guns in a way. Like, I don't know. I just think there's not a formula, and be inspired by the people you look up to. Like, say you look up to Trey or Wayne, and be inspired by them, but don't feel like you have to be them. Don't feel like you have to be that person. Just be inspired by how driven they are. Um, I think that's the best advice, and also to realize the animals need us. Like, we take your breaks that you need to stay in the fight for the long haul, but recognize that animals are dying as we're talking. Like, sometimes I always think, like, when I'm starting a podcast, like, I should start that. There's this website called vegancalculator.com, and you can click on animal stats, and it's a real-time counter of animals dying. And I should start that at the beginning of a podcast. So at the end, we can look at how many animals died while we were talking. And I mean, I know that can feel overwhelming. I don't mean to make people feel overwhelmed and catatonic, but it should be a driver. Just to remember that this struggle is real. It's, being activism for the right reason too, and that's got to be the animals. And by the way, I've had this moment before, even doing demonstrations, where I've realized I didn't really even spare much thought for the animals during this demonstration. I was so wrapped up. Spare a thought for the animals. Make sure you think about them. Think about them a lot. Not to be catatonic, not to think, not to be cripplingly sad, but make sure you're remembering why you're doing this. Because it can be easy to get swept up in human relationships and dramas and everything, but you have to keep those animals in the front of your brain. I have to tell myself that too sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of times where I probably would have quit if I didn't if I didn't center it back around to the animals. It's tough to find that balance of if you think about the animals every moment of every day, it can become so overwhelming that you don't want to do anything.
Right.
But you also, like you said, you want to spare them a thought and uh, keep keep them, with you, because that's why we're doing this.
Yeah. Oh, and also one thing I want to add is just that you're you are capable of more than you know. Like that, I'm sure you've had those experiences in life where you tried something, and even if you failed, you're like, well, like, no, I can do that. Um, we've talked about your speak out. We've talked about how the Mike Shannon just threw the megaphone in your face and you went. And you probably didn't know at that time that you could speak like that for the animals. And so many people's fear is public speaking. So find your voice, but also push yourself. Like I said in the beginning, that year of reinvention for me was really powerful, where I was just trying to try everything and push my limits a little bit further each time. I recommend everybody trying that too, and to just know that things that you thought were obstacles sometimes aren't obstacles, and you can do great things. Everybody is capable of extraordinary things. Like that's one of the cool things about getting to know these larger than life figures, people like Wayne, whoever it is. You realize they are people. I mean, they seem like so inaccessible at times. They're in this big world. No, they're flawed human beings in ways, which should tell you that you can do these great things too. Um, there's nobody who's like a superhero out there. There's no superhuman person that has no flaws and no weaknesses and no fears, except for maybe Paul Watson and Jerry. They don't feel fear, but normal people do. Yes.
I think it was your interview. You mentioned John Curtin earlier. I think it was your interview with him, maybe, where I think y'all were talking about Barry Horn, and, sort of how he's idolized is maybe the wrong word, but, like, sort of like looked at as a hero in the movement, which he is. But obviously, he's a personal hero of mine. He's incredible. He gave everything for the animals. But John, even having been a close friend of Barry, was sort of like talking about how, he's almost worried about that it might be dangerous to sort of idolize people in the movement, because for various reasons, like one being, oh, I could never be that person, when you absolutely can. Like, everybody has something to offer, like you said, and it may not be the exact same as somebody that you look up to, but there is definitely something for everybody. And as we wrap up, Jeremy, I'm wondering, like, what what is what are you excited about in animal rights? Are there things that you are looking forward to? And also, if you just have any final message as we come to a close.
Well, I just want to say that line that you took from John Curtin is the one that stuck out. Like of all my podcasts, that's the one that really struck me, because it goes to it stabs at the heart of exactly what I was doing for my podcast, which was idolizing these people, worshiping these people in a way. Like, I don't mean like ridiculously hero worshiping, but calling everybody heroes. And it's actually quite a tension for me, because I do believe John's a hero. I do believe Barry's a hero and you're a hero. And all the people that I've had on my podcast are just extraordinary people. But just to articulate what you were saying, he said it's disempowering. It can be disempowering where it's only heroes that do these great liberations. That's bullshit. He was saying, me, Barry, Jill Phipps, it was just what we did. And he's worried that by making these people out to be folk heroes, it makes it seem like you can't do these things. And it was just the way that people did. So I really take that point. But I have that tension where I also do want to celebrate people for the great work that they do. So I like that you took that quote.
And I think there can be both, right? I mean, I think
Yeah,
there's space
that's
for
where I've
both, where we
landed.
can, yeah, we can celebrate people's achievements, and we can look to people as an example without hero worshiping,
Yeah.
basically.
I mean, I want them to be heroes. I just want everybody else to be a hero too. So I mean, I think they are heroes. And I've said this to someone, I can't remember who I was talking to, but it was Andy Stepanian, where I was saying, I feel this tension where I shouldn't call someone a hero, but if you ask those dogs that you rescued from that place, you're a literal hero. You save lives. So by definition, you're a hero. But yeah, what I'm excited about in the movement is, and it's not just because I'm on your podcast, but I'm excited about AAC and CAFT and DXC and Wayne and all these groups. I'm excited that there's Animal Rising, and I'm excited that there's all these groups of people who are kind of fed up with not getting wins and are decided, no, we're getting wins. We're going to start winning in this movement. And yeah, I hope we don't lose that. I hope repression doesn't break that, because I know in the past there's been this huge wave of momentum and it's been broken by repression. You just got the Omni win. CAF got the Condé Nast win with your help. We're seeing this amazing momentum happen right now. And then like right after I think it may have been right after the Ridgeland win. We got the Ridgeland win. Ridgeland's going to get shut down. Right after that, Zoe got convicted. And I'm grateful that the movement has not gone under their bed sheets, as one of our mutual friends says, in fear. Like we have to withstand setbacks and remember all the wins that we're getting. We're getting so many wins thanks to collaboration and drive and motivation and self-determining motivation, where all these activists, they may be having having AAC and CAFT and all these groups facilitate their work, but really it's them, right? Trey, you know that. They're taking it on themselves. It requires someone in some community to say, I'm going to do this. And they're doing it. And we need way more of that. And I'm excited that it's happening. And I hope it's inspiring to people, because it should be. And people, I don't say this to like bolster us like on the level of like MLKs and that kind of thing. I'm not trying to do that, but people should feel like this is a justice movement that is grand and historic. I think Will Potter, by the way, I'm not trying to steal his words, I think he said something similar to this in that interview that I said, but people should feel the historic weight of this. You're a part of something extraordinary. And you should feel a responsibility with that and take some pride in it too. Allow yourself to feel some pride, I guess, too. Yeah.
Jeremy, it's been an honor and a privilege to have you on the show. I feel very fortunate to be on the other side of the microphone and be able to like dive into your world a little bit. And we've been friends for a long time, but I learned so much about you that I didn't even know with this interview. So I'm feeling very fortunate that you came on, and I'm also feeling very fortunate that you're going to be a part of the Animal Liberation Hour team. I hope that people will continue to check out our channel. I hope people will continue to check out your channel. There's just some brilliant long form interviews with a lot of incredible people over there. And just one last time, thanks again, Jeremy.
Thank you, Trey. You're one of my favorite human beings on the planet. And so the answer will always be yes if you invite me, and you're always welcome back on my program anytime. We'll just keep this going. And it's such an honor to know you. Like I said, I felt like it's historic to be there for that moment where you had that first speak out, and God, it was so good. And you've been such a powerful voice for the animals. So it is a true honor to be here. And thank you to AAC, who's doing just amazing work, and the whole team.
The feeling's mutual. Thanks for everything you're doing for animal rights history, for animal rights present, and all that you do, man, using your special skills for the animals. I appreciate it. The animals appreciate it. And we'll be hearing from you soon on a future episode of the Animal Liberation Hour.
Sounds good. Much love, Trey.
Hey everybody, I really hope that you enjoyed that conversation with Jeremy, and I'm really looking forward to him coming on as a host of the Animal Liberation Hour. I hope that you'll please rate and review the podcast. It helps others find it more easily, and the more people listen, the more people will be inspired to take action for the animals. And if you're listening on YouTube, we hope that you'll like and subscribe for the same reasons and maybe even leave us a comment. Please rate and review the podcast. It helps others find it more easily, and the more people listen, the more people will be inspired to take action for the animals. If you're listening on YouTube, we hope you'll like and subscribe for the same reasons and maybe even leave us a comment. If you enjoy the Animal Liberation Hour and want to support our work at Animal Activism Collective, please consider joining our Patreon for as little as $2 a month. This goes such a long way in helping us grow the animal rights movement through mentorship, as well as continuing to take bold action for animals. Don't forget to follow us on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram too. January 23rd through February 1st, AAC is returning to the West Coast for 10 jam-packed days of animal rights activism in Los Angeles, California. Check out our link tree to learn more about the AAC LA Convergence. This is not one you're going to want to miss. One more reminder that you can sign up for a free mentor to help you with your animal rights activism at animalactivismcollective.com. Someone who will cater a mentorship specifically for you and help you become the most effective activist that you can be. If you needed a sign that you should take action for animals, this is it. Remember, it will take all of us to achieve animal liberation. So stay focused, stay positive, be effective, and keep doing your part. Until next time.